Maybe you've already experienced this. The house in silence. Everything stopped, and suddenly, that sound. Paws on the floor. Light, rhythmic, family members. As if he was still there, walking around the house, the same way he always was. But he's not there anymore. And that's when something inside you stops, because it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, it does. If you've ever lost a dog, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and that's why this video exists. Today, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people feel, but almost no one has the courage to admit. Why do some people continue to listen to their dogs, even after they are gone? And most importantly, is this just nostalgia? Or is there something deeper going on? Because if you've ever heard that sound, or if you've ever felt that strange presence, or even avoided talking to someone for fear of looking crazy, this video can completely change the way you see all of this. Here you will understand. Why does this happen? What does this say about the bond between you and your dog? And mainly, why maybe this isn't the end of the story between you two. But before any explanation, let me bring you back to a simple moment. A moment every dog owner knows. You arriving home, opening the door, and before you even see it, you already heard. Little Paws running across the floor. His anxiety, his joy. That sound that always meant you came back, and he was waiting. Now answer me honestly. What did you feel the last time you thought you heard that same sound after he was gone? Because some people say it's just memory. Others say it's the brain trying to fill the void. But there are reports that don't fit this, stories from people who heard, in unexpected moments, in places where there was no explanation, and in situations that didn't seem like just memories. And that's when everything starts to look different. Because maybe the silence in the house isn't so silent after all. And maybe what you heard, it wasn't just nostalgia. But to understand this, we need to go back a little. Going back to something that everyone feels, but few can explain it. What really happens to the house? When is he gone? After he leaves, it's not just the absence that remains. It is the way of the house that changes. You walk in, and everything is still in the same place. The sofa, the objects, his plate, sometimes even the water still in the pot. But it seems that something essential was removed from there, as if the house had lost a kind of life that will never return in the same way. And perhaps what weighs most is not what you see. It's what you don't hear anymore, that sound of paws crossing the hallway, the slight noise coming from the kitchen, or him following you around the house, even when you didn't even notice, because he was always there. If you got up, he got up. If you changed rooms, he followed. If you stopped, he lay close. And now, you walk around the house, and no one follows you. There is an invisible space around you, where there was a presence before. Maybe there's still a specific corner that you avoid looking at for a long time, the place where he slept, the bed, or that spot on the floor that he chose as his. Because when you look, it's not just an empty place. It's like a silent reminder of everything that was there before. And the strangest thing is that even without him, you still feel like you're being watched sometimes. Not in a scary way, but in a familiar way. Like that silent look he had. That look that seemed to understand you without needing any words. A lot of people report this, but they almost always keep it to themselves. One person once commented that weeks after her dog left, she still moved her foot when getting out of bed, as if he was still lying there, automatic, natural, real, even though I knew he wasn't there anymore. This is not just habit. It's a bond. Because when a dog lives with you, it doesn't just take up physical space. He occupies routine. It occupies silence, occupies presence. And when he leaves, It's not just the house that stays quiet. It's as if a part of your own life is muted too. And maybe that's why, sometimes, in the middle of this silence, any small noise attracts attention. A crack on the floor, a slight drag, an echo that seems all too familiar. And for a second, your heart reacts before logic, as if something inside you said, "He's here." And in that moment, there is no doubt, there is no explanation. There is only the feeling. Now tell me, have you ever felt like the house is too empty, like something should still be there? Because it is exactly in this void that some experiences begin to happen, and what seemed like just longing begins to take another form, a way that a lot of people can't explain it. And that's when things really start to change. In the beginning, you try ignore. You tell yourself it's just an impression, which is silence playing tricks, which is the longing trying to occupy the space that was left. But then, it happens again. And this time, it doesn't seem so easy to explain. You are sitting, distracted, perhaps looking at your cell phone, or doing something simple every day. And then, you listen. The pause. Not just any sound. It's that specific rhythm, that cadence you would recognize anywhere. Because you've heard that sound hundreds of times. And the strangest thing, it's just that it doesn't come from your head. It appears to be coming from the house, from the floor, from the hallway, as if it were really happening. You stop, hold your breath, and for a few seconds, everything inside you is on alert. It's not fear, it's recognition. But when you look, there is no one. And then the conflict begins. Because a part of you knows it doesn't make sense, but another part is absolutely sure of what he heard. And this doesn't just happen once. It happens at specific times, when the house is quieter, when you are most sensitive, or, oddly enough, when you miss it most. One person said that, days after losing their dog, I was in the kitchen at night, when he clearly heard the sound of Paws approaching from behind, exactly as it happened before. She even turned her body, automatically, ready to talk to him, but there was no one. And yet, she said the sensation was not fright. It was of presence. As if for a moment, everything had returned to normal. As if he were still there, just invisible. And that changes everything. Because it doesn't feel like a thought. It doesn't feel like a memory. It feels like an experience, something that happens outside of you. But it hits right inside. And perhaps the most curious detail is that these moments are not accompanied by fear. They come up with something much more specific, a mix of longing with comfort. As if that wasn't a mistake. But yes, a kind of visit. And then you start asking yourself questions you had never considered before. If this is just memory, why does it feel so real? If it's just imagination, why does it happen at such specific moments? And mainly, why is that sound? Is it still exactly the same? Now tell me honestly, if it was just nostalgia, could she recreate something as accurate as that? Because the more this happens, it doesn't seem like a coincidence at all. And it looks more like that something is still there, something you don't see, but somehow still finds a way to be noticed. And it's exactly here that the doubt starts to get deeper. Because if it's not just a memory, so what is it? At this point, the mind tries to take control. She needs to explain. She needs to organize what is happening, because it doesn't fit easily. Then come the ready answers. It's just the brain repeating patterns. You're used to the sound. It's nostalgia transforming memory into sensation. And yes, there is a part of truth in this. The human brain is powerful. He records routines, sounds, presences. It creates shortcuts. He anticipates movements. When you live with a dog for years, the sound of Paws is not just a noise, it's a deep record, automatic. almost like breathing. So, theoretically, in a silent environment, in a moment of absence, the brain could, yes, recreate this. But this is where things start to not add up so well. Because these sounds do not appear randomly. They happen at very specific times. Times when you're not thinking about him. Times when your mind is occupied with something else. Moments when there would be no immediate emotional reason. And yet, the sound comes. Of course. Sharp. Family. As if it had a real origin. And there is one more detail that many people report. The sound doesn't just stay in your head. He seems to have direction. It comes from a point in the house, moves, get closer, or move away. This is not common in a simple souvenir. Memories don't walk down the hallway. Memories don't make a bow in the room. Memories don't make you turn your body, believing for a second that someone is there. Then the conflict begins. On the one hand, logic saying that everything can be explained. On the other, the experience saying that it was too real to ignore. And the more you try to rationalize, something else inside you resists. Because it's not just about listening. It's about feeling. It's about that immediate feeling of recognition. The same one you had when he was actually there. As if, for a moment, time had returned. And this generates a type of doubt that is not common. It's not a cold question. It's an emotional doubt, almost intimate, because if it's just imagination, so why does it seem so true? But if it isn't? So what does this mean? There is a point where logic starts to get too small, to explain experiences that are too big inside. And maybe the error is not in trying to explain, but in trying to explain everything in the same way, because not everything that is real is visible. Not everything that continues remains the same. And maybe, what are you listening to? Don't be something that gets stuck in your mind, but something that, somehow, still chooses to be close. Now think calmly. What if what you heard was not created by you, but rather perceived by you? Because this question changes everything. It opens up a possibility that many people avoid. But when faced, it starts to make sense in a different way. And that's exactly where that history stops being about absence, and it starts to be about continuity. There is a moment, almost imperceptible, in which the pain begins to change shape. It doesn't decrease, it doesn't disappear, but it transforms. Before, it was absence. Now, it starts to feel like a presence. And this usually happens exactly after these experiences. After listening, to feel, to almost see. Because something inside you starts to question, what if he's not really gone? Not in the physical sense, you have already accepted this, but in the deepest sense, in the bond, in connection, in what existed between you. And that didn't just depend on the body, because when a dog lives with you, he doesn't just learn your routine. He learns you, your mood, your silence, your difficult moments. He notices things that no one else notices, and he responds, without needing to understand words. This is no ordinary bond. This is continuous emotional presence. And maybe, presences like this don't disappear out of nowhere. Maybe they change shape. And this is where a lot of people start to see something different. Not as a forced explanation, but like a feeling that makes sense inside, as if those little signs were not memories, but forms of continuity. One person said that, months after the loss, she could still hear light footsteps near her room, especially at night. At first, he tried to ignore it. Then, he started paying attention. And one day, instead of being scared, she just said in a low voice, "You can stay. I know it's you." She said that, at that moment, he felt a peace he hadn't felt since his last day with him. This doesn't prove anything, but it also cannot be ignored. Because there is a silent pattern to all this. Experiences are not scary. They comfort. They do not bring fear. They bring recognition. And perhaps that says more than any logical explanation. Maybe that says, when the bond is real, it doesn't finish. It continues in a way that we are still learning to understand. And this is where everything changes, because the question is no longer, is this real? And it becomes, what is this bond really? And there is a phrase that sums it all up, and that might change the way you see your dog forever. Some bonds don't end with absence. They just stop being visible. For a second, breathe, and back to that sound. Pause on the floor. Now, instead of thinking it's just nostalgia, try to feel another way. No fear, no rush to explain, just realizing. Because maybe that is not an echo of the past, but a sign of something that is still happening now. If this is true, so the story between you and him is not over. She just changed her shape, and that leads to an even deeper question. If he's still around, what exactly is he doing? If the presence continues, so it's not there by chance. And this is the part that most touches anyone who has experienced this, because it doesn't seem random. It doesn't feel empty. It seems intentional, as if, somehow, he was still accomplishing something. Many people begin to notice a pattern after a loss. Difficult times, heavier days, quieter nights. And, precisely in these moments, something happens. A light sound, a feeling of company, a type of comfort that appears without clear explanation, as if someone had arrived, without making enough noise to be seen, but enough to be felt. There is an idea, present in various forms of spirituality, that very strong bonds do not end with the end of the body. They continue as a presence, not physical, but conscious. And when we talk about dogs, this takes on an even deeper meaning, because the dog doesn't connect with you out of interest, not out of obligation. It connects by direct bond, out of pure loyalty, by constant presence. He accompanies you on the good days, but especially on the days when no one else notices you. And maybe this type of connection is not something that simply disappears. Maybe she will continue, otherwise. More subtle, quieter, but still active. Some people report that after the loss, in moments of intense sadness, they feel as if something lightly touches them. Others say they hear the sound of Paws exactly when they are thinking about him. And there are those who say that, even without sound. There is an inexplicable certainty that you are not alone. This is not about proving, it's about noticing. Because when something brings peace instead of fear, that says a lot. Maybe these few signs don't get fired. Be a continuous presence, as if the dog, even without a body, he was still doing what he always did, stay close, to accompany, to care. And this completely changes the way we see what happened, because it is no longer a total loss, and it becomes a transformation of presence. It's not about he's gone anymore. It's about he continues in a way that I'm still learning to feel. And when you start to accept that possibility, something inside you rearranges itself. The pain doesn't go away, but it makes sense. And the silence in the house, it no longer feels as empty as it used to. Now think about it calmly. If he spent his whole life by your side, following you around the house, waiting for you at the door, lying next to you without asking for anything, why would he just stop doing that from one moment to the next? Maybe he hasn't left. Maybe you're just starting to realize otherwise. And that's exactly what leads to the final moment of this story. Because there is something that almost no one tells you about that sound. That same sound that you thought you'd never hear again. Now, go back with me to the beginning. The house in silence. Everything stopped. And suddenly, the sound of paws on the floor. At the beginning of this video, this sound seemed impossible, confused, even a little scary. But now, perhaps it has another meaning. Because after everything you felt here, of everything you remembered, of everything that started to make sense, that sound no longer seems empty. He looks familiar, almost like before. And maybe that's exactly it. Maybe it's not something new. Maybe it's just continuity. Because that sound, it was never just a noise. It was a sign, presence, for company, of bonding. It was the simplest way he had to say, I'm here. And maybe this hasn't changed as much as it seems. Perhaps the only thing that has changed, it was the way you perceive it. Today, when the house is silent, and you hear something faint coming from the hallway, don't rush to explain. Don't delete it too quickly. Stay for a second. Listening. Sit down. Because it might not just be memory, it could be a type of presence that still finds simple ways to appear, as he always did, effortless, without attracting too much attention, just being there. And maybe that's why so many people report the same thing, not afraid, but with a type of emotion that is difficult to explain, a mix of longing with relief, as if, for a moment, distance ceased to exist. And if you made it this far, maybe it wasn't by chance. Maybe there is something inside you that recognized this story, that it felt true, even without proof. And that matters. Now I want to invite you, not like someone watching a video, but as someone who lived a real bond. If you've ever heard something similar, if you have ever felt this presence, or if there is a moment that you have never been able to explain, right here in the comments. Tell me how it was. Because when you share this, you realize you are not alone. And other people, that they also felt, but never had the courage to speak. And there is something more, a kind of silent declaration that a lot of people feel, but never put into words. If deep down you believe that your dog is still with you in some way, even if it's just a feeling, write like this in the comments, he's still here, not as proof, but as recognition, because bonds like this are not common, and maybe they were never just about a single life. And before you go, remember that simple scene, you arriving home and hearing the little paws running towards you, the joy, the rush, the certainty that he was waiting for you. Now think about it another way. What if, somehow, is he still there? Not in the same way, but with the same bond, with the same presence, waiting, not at the door, but somewhere you are still learning to notice. So today, when the silence seems too loud, listen more calmly. Because sometimes, what we call absence, it's just a presence, who learned to feel differently.